I got to have it on to have the turns on the audio for a screen.
call to order. Now you can.
Thanks. Take it over.
Just a reminder, if you speak, turn one of these on, and if you don't have a microphone near you, grab one or we'll pass one to you so that it records correctly, and we'll keep them off otherwise. So, welcome, and we have essentially just one thing on the agenda today for our work session, and this came about just through discussions earlier. I think when we did our board retreat even, we had talked at different times about assessments and questions about what have we changed over the last few years, and it just seemed like a really good time just to do an update. We had added in some components at high school for doing things a little differently with their norm referenced assessment and some things like that. So I know that our entire team who is here at the table, I think most everybody has put together some great information. And we will also probably put this on the website. We thought after everybody's done such a great job of putting this all together, that we'll be able to just post it so people can look if they're curious about how assessments work. The other thing I think is always a central question from parents and community members and within our profession is, how do we know what the right balance is for assessments? And I was talking with a group of students today in the teacher pathway class at Roosevelt, and one of the kids asked a question about that. And I said, when you think about assessment, there are so many layers, but what it really comes down to is getting an accurate picture to help us know if what we're providing for you is working the way it's designed. And that's at a classroom level, might be looking by department, it's by grade level, it's by school district, and then it's by state and the nation. And all those pieces fit together, all to inform us if we're doing our best work for you, the student. And it was kind of nice to be telling that to a student. And so that's what really goes into every time we decide to add or take away or change something, it's to make sure that we're getting an accurate picture of student learning. So I just want to preface our conversation this afternoon, and we'll talk more about that through the information. And if you have questions, stop us along the way, and we will be happy to answer that. Or if you think of things after the work session that we didn't include, we can do that as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Boyson.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for having us here. I'm going to start with, you know everyone, but I'm going to have them introduce themselves because this is our team that put the report together. So Linda, will you start, please? And your name and department.
Linda McDaniel, elementary curriculum. Demi Moon, middle school curriculum. Kristen Granager, high school curriculum. Nicole Hansen, assessment and evaluation.
Doug Morrison.
Two.
Kat Gilbertson, special services curriculum.
Carol Belden, elementary, special ed.
All right, thank you. So today we're really excited. We have a comprehensive look at assessments and interventions across the district, starting at birth to 3 all the way through grade 12, and looking at interventions and assessments and the curriculum. And so building this board report really did allow us to put that all in one location. And like Dr. Stabum referenced, we'll be able to post that because it'll be good information just to have posted for anybody that's interested, and we can update it as needed. So we'll go through and highlight just some different assessments first, and then we'll get into the detail. So again, we're going to talk today about the types of assessments and how the data informs the instructional decisions. We're going to look at national, state, and district outcomes or types of assessments. So those national assessments, state and district, and within the district we have screening, diagnostic, and progress monitoring tools. And just an overview of what these different types of tools do, but then what they look like in our district, we'll go through those. So a screening assessment is really given multiple times during the year to see if the students are on track or at the benchmark. Each time we give that assessment, sometimes they're beginning, middle, or end of the year, so they're designed with indicators to depict, in this case, overall reading. We have universal screeners to help select the skills to be measured, the most important skills for that reading development, or brief assessments that identify what students are at that benchmark. So the screening really tells who is not at or on benchmark, and then we use that to help build in the supports for them. So some examples are the MAP growth assessment, the phonics inventory, and the reading inventory. And so the MAP growth is giving at elementary, but then phonics and reading inventories are given at the middle school level. Diagnostic assessment is designed really to deep dive into that one area. So it tells how to support the students and what to do about it. So this is what they need and what are we going to do about it? It's only given to some students and those that have been identified, and it gives those specific strengths and weaknesses. And again, it's to provide that in-depth information about a student's skills and inclinations. And we have some over on the bottom right, we have those the core assessment that's given, and that's more special education. But then the phonological awareness screening too at the special education. So that's a tier 2 level screening. So progress monitoring, we have those types of assessments to determine who's receiving instruction and if they're making progress. And in the classroom, we're giving those 2 or 3 times a week, used to determine their progress and whether that instruction needs to be adjusted. And it serves a specific focus on that type of instruction. So there's different types, like NWA is given 3 times a year, that MAP growth. The WIDA is given once. We give a screener at the beginning of the year, but then we give that assessment we just finished, tomorrow's the last day for that WIDA. And then the BAR benchmark assessment within that reading at the lower levels. And here's some additional progress monitoring tools. So we have teacher observation, informal and formal assessments, curriculum tasks, and then embedded curriculum assessments or unit tests within the curriculum to measure that their growth or the standards met. And then we have the big stakes outcome assessments. Those are our state mandated assessments, those summative measures. So our state accountability test that we take in the spring. We have our unit assessments that are built into the curriculum and semester exams. So that's an overview of different types of assessments. And now we'll get a look at how birth to 5, then we'll break it down by grade level chunks for those screening and different tools. So this is birth to 5 assessments. You can see the screening line, the progress monitoring, the diagnostic, and the outcome. So that way we've outlined which assessments, which type of assessments are given as needed within those grade level plans.
So go back to that just for a second, and leave that up there just for a minute, because that's a lot to digest. Questions from board members? We'll give you just a minute.
So, how many of the curriculum assessments are written by the staff? Does the staff write these tests so they know what's on them? So they teach to that subject matter. And that's what they're tested over?
Yeah.
So Mark, I can tell you at the high school level, when we're in a curriculum study, that's one of the things we work on. We start with that semester summative assessment, and then we work backwards from that as we design our units, and then we work to write some common unit assessments as well. The teachers on the team have access to the semester test while we write it, but we do semester test previews at school, so all teachers can come and see those assessments. So we're in the process of doing that right now. Teachers can come and look at them and see if they have any questions.
So the assessments in middle school and elementary, those are developed by the teachers as well?
I can speak to middle school. We have been working on this for, I would say, the last 3 years, creating those common assessments so that instead of all 17 sixth grade social studies teachers writing their own end of unit 1 assessment, they've come together and written a common assessment that they all give they've aligned it to the rigor of the standards. And yes, it's been written by a committee. And then after we give that assessment, we come together about once a quarter as a committee, and there's a representative from every middle school in every grade level on the committee. So 6 middle school, 6th grade social studies teachers will come together. They review the results of that assessment in each building, and then they look at the assessment to see if it needs editing, and if there are questions that should be thrown out, if there's questions that we need to add, so that they have a statistically sound picture of what learning is taking place.
And at the elementary level, just a little bit different look, as we don't have semester tests. Ours are, generally speaking, unit tests that will come directly from the curriculum. So yes, teachers have access to that. On occasion, a teacher or a teacher group during collaboration, they'll write maybe like a formative assessment, and I'll administer that. So that would be a teacher-written assessment that would happen. But in full transparency, elementary is not in the same place as middle school and high school yet in terms of district-wide assessments that would be specific to any one unit, but an area that we're working on. What's the rest of your question? Tell me what else you want to know.
Well,
What are you really asking?
I just want to know if the tests are written by the staff,
Some.
if it's off the curriculum.
Yeah,
I don't want anybody tested on something they don't know they're going to be
that they
tested.
haven't been taught. Yep,
So that's not fair.
right.
Sounds like there's some consistency. Thank you so much. I feel there's some consistency across, of all the 6th graders and kind of what their expectation is as a 6th grader to know in social studies, for example, and so on and so forth. So the way that you're going about it and getting representatives from all the different areas seems to be the smart way to handle that.
Our goal is, and we'll get through, this is only, we're not even to kindergarten yet. So, so we'll get there, but we do have a plan, like Kristen and Demi and Linda talked about, is that all students at whatever grade will take that same assessment that's been teacher created, and then in our new learning management system that includes assessment, it has the standard, the curriculum map, the assessment, and so we can see how each student in each classroom at building level across the district are performing. So that way we can shine a bright light on, look at these bright spots. So how are they teaching that? So we can learn and help the others. So that's a grand plan.
Thank you.
Can I expand on what you just said? So one of the things we do when we get the results is that we look at how students did by standard, and then teachers and schools can look at that. So in their own individual schools and their professional learning communities, they can look and, if my students didn't do well, but yours did do well, then we talk about, what did you do? Maybe I could try that. And then we do that across the district too. And we try to focus on where are the strengths, and so that who's ever doing really well can then help others who maybe didn't cover that as well as they should have. And we've seen a lot of growth and collaboration because of that.
All right, so we'll go on to birth to 5 assessment guide. So again, here's the curriculum that they use. So they use the high scope and Haggerty in the Tier 1 curriculum. Tier 2 is increasing intensity. They use the Haggerty, that's the phonemic awareness. And then increasing intensity with Tier 3, and that's the Haggerty. Kindergarten, you can see that first box has all your assessments and screening, progress monitoring, diagnostic outcome. And if you see something there you're not sure what that is, just please ask. And then down below we show the curriculum and the interventions that are used to support the students in that gaining of those skills. And we have this laid out for all of them. So again, we'll go through this fairly quickly, but then we'll have each of the coordinators talk about things that are happening in their area, so that we have a little better understanding. But this will be a great thing, like we said, to post out on the website, so kindergarten parent can look and say, oh, this is what they use.
I wish we could find a few more acronyms
I know.
for our assessments.
I know.
People wonder why it's difficult to
I
understand.
was gonna say, you know, you look at those and for me, I would have to like stop and Google
Uh-huh.
like every single one of them. And so I don't know if there's like a one.
We'll have a
pager.
list.
Yes, yes,
Awesome.
exactly. Almost like a table of contents.
Yeah, because sometimes if you even just knew what the
Index, yeah,
acronym meant,
right.
it would make sense to you. But when you look at it, you're like,
Mhm.
I got nothing. So
Yeah.
okay, perfect.
Pour, sips, teapot, so, you know, it's all of those. So this is grades 1 and 2, the assessment guide. Again, many of them are the same. You know, so the bar benchmarks are reading instruction at the elementary level. We have MAP in there, MAP reading fluency. We have the WIDA model, which supports the WIDA access test at the end, the outcome at the end. So that's really some of the lessons built in that they have access throughout. And there's the assessment for math for grades 1 and 2. We have Dreambox, which is an online module for students. We have the Bridges Math Intervention. So that's helping build the skills for kids that don't have that yet. And some hands-on math at the special ed. Then grades 3 through 5, again, you'll see many of the same. You'll see here, this is ELA, but you'll see Bridge the Gap, and that's an intervention model. So we have SIPs at the younger grades. We have Bridge the Gap at grades 3 through 5 to help support students.
And that was an area of question that some of you asked, I don't know, last year at some point, is what do we do for those 3rd through 5th graders? And so that's a gap that we have filled and continue to fill. And one of the things, you know, when we look at kind of the outlay of assessment in this way, kind of assumes that we're talking about the same students we get in kindergarten, we have all the way through. Well, we also have students who move in from a lot of different places that we have to be able to quickly screen and determine what their appropriate level of instruction is. And sometimes we get good information quickly, and sometimes you wait months and months and months. And these are also tools that we use to make those decisions early on. And one of the harder things is when you get a student who's in those upper grades of elementary and they're significantly behind in reading and math, because then you're trying to adjust in that regular classroom as well as getting them into an intervention, and sometimes that's really tricky. So these are helpful in that way too.
And there's the 3rd through 5th math. Again, same interventions, but outlines it nicely for people. And then we move into middle school. So 6th through 8th reading assessment guide and the curriculum and interventions. You'll see the reading inventory, phonics inventory, and we identified those as RIPI earlier. That helps support Read 180, System 44. Those models, you can see they're clear over on the bottom for the increasing intensity in Tier 3 to help support those students. And then you have the 6 through 8 math assessment. Power Math is our Tier 3 intervention. Super Math. Yep, the SPED curriculum. And then 9 through 12 reading assessments. And the math assessments and curriculum. Again, we'll have that posted, so if you have any questions on that. And now we'll move into just more of that continuous improvement cycle. And so we continue to look at, you know, we study our curriculum. We're on that 7-year cycle and really looking at how we are performing on our assessments as we move into a curriculum study, looking at that information, going into the study, then as they review new curriculum, compare it with the standards to develop that, to make sure that we're in that continuous improvement. But then again, as the coordinators said, they talk about that as they look at the results of the assessments ongoing, not just every 7 years, but ongoing to help support or tweak anything that we need to do as we see that growth of our students. So that curriculum alignment, we know that students' learning is best achieved through that standard written, taught, supported, and assessed curriculum. And again, that's that cycle we just talked about. So our department is responsible for developing a guaranteed and viable curriculum for all the students across the district. Just remember that, Todd, when we get to budget. Building admin and instructional coaches ensure the written curriculum is taught with integrity. And it really is to look at, as the building admin are in those classrooms, supporting teachers and students, are they where they need to be, and are they familiar enough with that curriculum to help support those teachers to ensure that what's happening in my building and your building across the district is the same. And the instructional coaches are key, and we've really had some good partnerships with administration and coaches, so that way they're all on that same page. And then student learning is measured through formative assessments. So those are our assessments that we see within that curriculum, embedded district summative, state assessments, and just looking at that continuous cycle. So each one of those types of assessments inform us a little bit differently to make sure that we're performing at the state level as we need to at that final time. So now we're going to move into elementary.
No, I think you'll know when I'm ready to move on, I'm guessing. So at the elementary level, we've had a really strong focus on literacy for the past couple of years. So what you'll see on this slide primarily focuses, or is the evidence that we've accomplished in terms of our literacy instruction.
Linda, will you pull that just a little closer to
I sure can. Just feels like it's right so in your face. So the first bullet item there is the instructional framework, and the instructional framework was developed as a result of COVID and then became a COVID keep because of the positive feedback that we were receiving from our staff members about that tool. And it really is just a guidance and some expectations for our staff classroom teachers, and it guarantees that our curriculum is followed and completed in a timely manner. So in the past, we had pacing guides, essential guides, but what we found was that buildings were maybe all over the place. I was in Unit 1, you were in Unit 2, and there just was not a strong focus district-wide. And so the framework really has established timelines, assessments, priority standards in the area of math and reading. And we will grow the instructional framework when we add science as a new adoption in 23-24. So looking forward to having that document there too. The bullet items next that come underneath of that are basically elements to highlight for you in regards to our literacy instruction. The first bullet item there is the reading and writing assessment prep tasks, which are for our grades 3 through 5. And these tasks were a part of our original curriculum adoption with collaborative classrooms. So from the very beginning, we've had access to these, but they were optional for teachers to utilize. They were kind of an extra resource. And as we continued to kind of learn and grow through collaborative literacy, discovered that there was real value in having those tasks as an expectation for our teachers. So I think it was last year where we put them into the framework and just said, these are the timelines. So 3 times a year, our teachers engage in these reading and writing assessment prep tasks. They do 2 things. One, first of all, they drive instruction. They're very much aligned to curriculum and standards. And so it gives us a really good view district-wide of where our students are performing with those specific standards and tasks. And then the second thing is they mimic, we created them digitally. So it mirrors and mimics what our kids experience when they take the state assessment, which sometimes is the bigger challenge in just trying to navigate double screens and different things. And I have to highlight over here and answer over here. And so we believe the reading and writing assessment tasks have provided just access to what is going to be expected on that state assessment. The next bullet item is being a reader. Again, an element that has been a part of our ELA curriculum since the beginning of time with collaborative literacy. It's the small group instruction, so where we meet those specific needs of students our kiddos we know come in as different readers along the way, and we want to ensure that we're meeting their needs. Yet, we also have that goal of creating proficient readers and writers. And so we established those benchmarks, and as a part of Infinite Campus last year, it's now a requirement of teachers to, at the end of each quarter, document where our kids are at within those being a reader, that set work, so that we can say with confidence that 70% of our kids are on target to be at grade level at the end of the year. So that is our being a reader work there. And then the last one that you see there is Haggerty and Bridge the Gap. And both of those are our most recent additions to our curriculum and really came out of just the continual kind of revisiting and visiting with teachers. And where do we think, knowing that we have kids who are not at grade level, where is that area of concern or challenge? And the phonemic awareness piece and foundational skills has been one of those areas that we know we were challenged by. And so we added Haggerty and Bridge the Gap. Haggerty is K1, Bridge the Gap is 2-5s for those products, but they're same company, kind of a partner product. Haggerty is taught whole group as a tier 1 approach. Bridge the Gap is more of that intervention piece for our 2-5 kiddos. Again, just since implementing that, we've had a lot of positive feedback from our staff members, and quite honestly, it's 10 minutes of the day for our K1 students, and I would say if you ever have an opportunity to see it in action, stop and watch. It's highly engaging for our kids, it's fast-paced, it's explicit instruction, and there's body movement to it. And so, as you can imagine in a K1 classroom, that serves those kids well.
What doesn't have body movement in
Yeah,
a K1
exactly.
classroom?
So, as we take a look at the instruction piece, we've targeted our professional learning to build the capacity of our coaches and admin, and ultimately our staff members through student-centered coaching in a book called Shifting the Balance this year. And with the addition of our instructional coaches to be one-to-one at the buildings, we've adopted Diane Sweeney's student-centered coaching model. This model builds the capacity of the teacher through a focus on student learning. And again, that student-centered coaching just encapsulates so many things that we're working on as a district in terms of learning goals, very targeted on standards, aligned to our curriculum, building the capacity of the teacher, but also really focusing on what are the students doing and what evidence do we have that they're making progress. And to have that partnership between our coaches and our teachers has just been incredibly valuable. Our elementary coaches have logged over 14,000 hours of coaching time this year in Kick-Up, with approximately 35% of that time specific to coaching cycles or coaching opportunities that are student-centered. This work is individualized to the teacher needs and targeted on student learning. In the next couple of slides, you'll see some testimonials from our classroom teachers that have engaged in this student-centered coaching model with their coach, and the impact that it's having not only on the teacher and their instructional practices, but on student achievement as well. And then the final bullet item there is our admin coach professional learning, and just to be really quite transparent and honest with you, just an area that we're really proud of as an elementary team. Once a month, our admin and coaches come together here at IPC and do professional learning, and the value that that has brought to our team is just been a game changer, quite honestly. It builds the capacity of our coaches along with our admin, and that's really the partnership for instructional leadership out in our buildings. So we're just really excited about the work that's happened there. To start the year off, we focused on a book called Shifting the Balance, and this book was a perfect fit because it was the research behind the instructional practices that is embedded in our curriculum, and it just has really allowed our teachers to polish some of those instructional practices that they utilize in their classroom and kind of give meaning to what they're being asked to do through our curriculum. As of March 14th, we will finish that book and the work, and that will be our last DCM for the year. And we're gonna jump right into PLC Plus, which will propel us into the 23-24 school year. And with PLC Plus, we're really going to focus on building what we call an innovation configuration map, and it's really just a pathway. Where are we at and where are we headed as a desired state for our collaboration model? And we're looking at that collaboration model district-wide, so that if I'm a teacher at Susan B. Anthony and I move to Robert Frost, collaboration doesn't have a different meaning and a different look, that we really are going to have a framework for expectations. That work through collaboration is really all about learning targets and success criteria, and really understanding the work that we're involved with in terms of instruction and assessment. So that's where we're headed in the next year. And then, as I stated, I'm not going to read them, but the next couple of slides are testimonials that were provided or just over the course of the year as part of a reflective piece with our student-centered coaching cycles. We've got a couple of testimonials from classroom teachers. We have a testimonial from a SIPS teacher. I didn't speak specific to SIPS. We've expanded that program into our non-title buildings. I think that's an area or a program that we're all fairly comfortable and familiar with, yet I think there's just a great testimonial there about the work that our SIPS teachers are doing and the impact that it's having on our kiddos. And then the final testimonial comes from a building admin, and again, the value of that partnership and that shared leadership in our elementary buildings. So that gives you a glimpse into elementary. What questions do you have for me?
A quick question.
Sure.
To the extent that you can granularize the assessment data to a particular building and classroom, and then use that information not only to build the capacity of the student, wherever their learning needs to go, but also the teacher, is really encouraging. I'm just curious, when you have those director-centered, what were they called?
Director-called meetings.
Director-called meetings. Who's the director? Like, who is really, because this is a really powerful data that you're collecting and granularizing to get down to the point of what are the students that are learning that particular unit really well, and spotlighting that particular teacher. And I mean, it's a great leadership, piece for the teacher, and then the other teacher that needs to come along beside and maybe learn some new strategies. So who's making that wheel go? Because that's important.
Our director-called meetings we're the 3 directors that get to call 3 meetings a year beyond our contract hours. And so at the elementary level, we have taken those 3 meetings, and with the gift, thank you to all of you, with having a coach in each building, we have taken that coach and admin leadership team in that building, and we've done a kind of a train-the-trainer model here. So myself and Abby Dawson, Sarah Hutchinson, who are literacy TOSIS for the district, we went through shifting the balance as a class. Then we dissected that. We did each chapter or shift with the admin coach team. Then we created the professional learning to be pushed out with the coach admin team to the building level. So multiple layers of learning that's happened, and we'll do the same thing with PLC Plus.
Good. Well, that's a lot of important work in collecting the data and being really useful and intentional and kicking that out, through their coaches. It just gives some real, So it's good. Good
Thank
job.
you.
Yeah.
Move on to middle school. Demi.
All right, sounds good. Well, to kind of parallel some of the things that Linda introduced, the major, I would say, changes or additions to middle school curriculum and middle school instruction over the last few years really stemmed back in 2018-19 from a committee that came together because there was concern that we had grading inequities across the middle schools. And so once we dove in and we went through a book study with that committee, there was representatives from every building. We read a book on grading, and we discovered we didn't have a grading problem as much as we had a feedback problem, and we had a feedback deficiency. And when we started trying to solve that problem, we realized that we had a lot of foundational pieces that were missing in our curriculum that were preventing us from giving good quality, consistent feedback and having those consistent grading practices. So we started at the beginning of 2019-20, ironic year to start something like that. We started a solid 5-year plan of creating a truly standards-based instruction model and a standards-based curriculum model. Not so much standards-based grading. We weren't as concerned about that part at that time, but we really wanted to make sure that we had standards-based teaching and learning going on in our classroom. And then, of course, COVID happened, and so we had to put a small pin in it, but we really did trudge through the following year when we came back and kept our foot on the gas and kept working to build some of those pieces. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about some of those pieces today. The first thing we really had to do was unpack and prioritize our standards. We really needed to make sure that in all of our areas, not just the core, but even in the encore, our teachers understood what their standards said. We wanted to make sure they understand the verbs, they understood the right level of rigor, and then the next step from that comes in breaking down those standards into learning targets or skills that are necessary in order to meet the rigor of the standard. And once we did that, we also realized we needed to order those learning targets into what we call learning progression. So there was a logical order to trying to master the individual standards in each course. We needed to prioritize them because 54 ELA standards in 7th grade, you can't make everything a priority, so you have to decide what is a priority at that point. And those have really been our focus. In order to do that in math and ELA, it's a lot easier because you can look at your state assessment and you can look at the standards that the state has prioritized, and it makes sense to make those the natural priorities in our math and our ELA classrooms, and then even so with science. So those blueprints have come in handy in that aspect. But you get into the non-state assessed content areas, and you really have to rely on the judgment of the teachers as to what are the most important key skills and key content areas. After we did those steps, which that might sound like it's a meeting or two, but that really took us about 2 years of unpacking and writing and rewriting and then trying them out in the classroom. As Linda mentioned, developing those scales, developing those success criteria. So when you are successful or when you're not successful, what does that look like? And when you actually start putting those into practice, teachers came back to the table and said, who wrote these? These are terrible. Who wrote this? And it's so, and then of course they would remind each other, we wrote these together. So we have to edit them together as well. So that work took us a couple of years, and we moved into further down our 5-year plan. And we made sure that our district curriculum guides or pacing guides, whatever you want to call them, really aligned to those priority standards, and we chunked those standards into units of study. That then led directly into what we've been working on for about the last 1.5 years, which is the authoring of those unit assessments, so that we made sure that all students had access to that equal level of rigor. And what 6th grade social studies in one of our middle schools looked like, it was parallel to that in all of the middle schools. And that's become important to all of us, but it also has been a lot easier to equalize when you have common assessments. And Linda talked about those windows of time and having that framework. Our assessments are given during certain windows throughout the year, and that has really caused us to not get to the end of the year and have one building maybe done in 7th grade math with the entire curriculum guide, and have another building still have 3 chapters left to study. And so that's been a mindset shift. That's been a challenge at times. And then we have snow days, and that causes everybody to flood my inbox with, are we moving the testing window because I missed 2 days of instruction? So it's been a different communication, but it's been fun to see them really own that and pay special attention to that as well. And so as we have finished up that portion of our 5-year plan, that leaves us now into the last piece, which is intervention. And all of these pieces have really come from Rick DeForest 4 essential questions for highly effective PLC models or professional learning community models. And that is, what is it that our students need to know? And so that really led us through the standard piece. And how will we know if they know it? That is what really drove our assessment writing. And then what do we do if they don't know it? And what do we do if they do? And so that's really now going to drive us into our next and final phase of our 5-year plan, which is creating those really solid intervention resources and those enrichment resources. So when we look at instruction, having that mindset shift of assessment not being a test, but being more of an opportunity to provide evidence of learning and then directing the route we're going. We've used this analogy so many times over the last 4 years at the middle school level, but we talk about how when you're going somewhere that you don't know how to get and you put it in your Maps app and you push go, which my husband struggles to, so we're working on that with him too. But if you push go, it tells you how to go. And if you take a wrong turn, it starts saying rerouting, rerouting, rerouting. And that's really the analogy we've used, is that when we get that assessment data back and we have that evidence of learning or that lack of evidence of learning, we reroute our instruction and we can then create a new path to move forward. So looking at the instructional changes, really having those instructional coaches partner with our teachers, partner with our teacher teams, and partner with the administrators. We're lucky enough at the middle school level to have our foot on both sides of the fence. We have content specialized instructional coaches, but we also have one housed in every building. So we're able to partner with the administration and partner with the teachers in that manner as well. We focused this year on backwards design from those common assessments. So we're encouraging teachers to really get together at the beginning of every unit of study, look at that unit assessment, know what students need to be able to know and do and understand, and then planning their instruction accordingly. And I just was sharing a win this morning at our joint services meeting that my biggest win this last week has been we met with a group of math teachers to start working on that intervention piece. And I didn't know how that was going to go because not all parts of this 5-year plan have gone smoothly. It's because it's been such a shift. But they are so excited to have resources available to them that are going to let them move into that intervention mode smoothly and have those reassessment opportunities prepared for them so that they're able to keep teaching the new stuff but continue working at the same time with the students who haven't mastered something from a former unit. And when I look at quotes, I asked one of our principals to just tell me how she thinks the last few years have been and to put it into kind of a tweet. And it was exciting to know that her quote really fit well with what I had written in my slide because I didn't share that with her ahead of time. And you can see what Mrs. Palladino-Hazlett from Whittier had to say about all the work that we've done. And if you have any questions, I guess I'll leave my mic on in case you do and I can answer those.
Thanks, Debbie. Kristen, high school.
This is part of kind of my own reflection, but so we know that, that there are, I've come to learn that there's teachers that have a lot of great content to teach, but their classroom management skills just are not there.
Mm-hmm.
This is my own reflection now, looking back and having an understanding of what was happening in the classroom. What part of, going back to the middle school, of this, knowing that we've got great content that's aligning with state standards, but at what level is classroom management? Are those teachers helped to be more successful? Because that does impact student learning.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would say that's the real power of our instructional coaches, being a resident in the building, but then also being those content specialists. They're able to partner and walk alongside new teachers pretty routinely for the first 2 years and then even that 3rd year. But it's been nice to have our coaches develop relationships with all teachers in a building because now we're starting to see our instructional coaches even get into our veterans classrooms more than they were when they were just focused on content at the middle school level. So I would say that's really where that partnership between the principal and the teacher and then the instructional coach and the teacher in order to work on improving those strategies for classroom management.
I think particularly at middle school. It's so important.
They are free spirits.
At all levels, we know that it is, but middle school seems to be sort of a real.
Okay, you will probably hear some of the same themes run through high school as well. As we talk about our curriculum, as we go through studies, really where we start is looking at those standards. We talk about unpacking them, and as Demi mentioned, prioritizing them. One of the things that we discovered when we started the math study back in 2018 or 2019 was that when we brought the standards out, teachers really weren't as familiar with all the standards as we thought they were. They knew the content, they knew what they were supposed to teach, but it really came down to looking at the standards we found that we really had to slow down and take some time and have everybody look through the standards, look through the language, look through the verbiage that was used so they could really see this is what students are expected to learn. And this year we're doing world language and science. And science is challenging because science standards have 3 parts. They have a core standard part, a cross-cutting standard, and a science and technology part to the standard. And science teachers discovered we are really hitting the core part of the standard well and some of the cross-cutting, but we're not always going into the depth that we need to when it comes to the science and technology part of the standard. And so being able to really dive deeply into those and understand what they're expecting students to learn was kind of our first step. And then our next step when looking at those standards was to write learning objectives or learning targets, different terminology sometimes, but the same idea. This is what we expect students to be able to do. This is what we expect students to learn tied to this standard. And then from there, we worked to talk about formative and summative assessments. And understanding the difference has been a bit of a challenge for high school teachers at times. I don't know if you've been in many high school classrooms, but the question is often asked, is this graded? You know, is this important? Are you going to take points? And a really important aspect when it comes to learning is to have that opportunity to show what you have learned and receive feedback before that grade is going into the grade book. And formative assessments really give students and teachers that opportunity to see this is where students are at. Have they mastered the learning? Are they ready for some enrichment? Or are they not there yet and we need to do some reteaching? And so we've really worked hard as we've gone through these studies to look at that data as we go and allow opportunities to give students those formative assessments and then some time for reteaching. So those are our big parts of our pacing guides. We've also really looked at academic vocabulary. It isn't that students have to memorize every word in a chapter. If you remember like your social studies book, you know, they'd have all those bolded terms. Really looking at what words, what concepts do students really need to master? Not that we're not going to cover the other things, but what do they really need to know, and focus on that academic vocabulary. Because sometimes, I say this to high school teachers as nicely as I can, you're a math teacher or you're a social studies teacher because you love that content and you know that content and you've studied it in depth and maybe you've taught it for years. And it's sometimes easy to forget that the students who come into your class maybe aren't excited to be there, but definitely don't have the depth of knowledge that you have or the background. And so making sure that that key vocabulary is pre-taught, and so you build those connections and provide that background knowledge is really important. I mean, even if you think of a word like table, and a table in math is different than a table in facts, is different than a table in social studies, and that's a very basic word, but making sure students understand that difference. And then we also really looked at the vocabulary that's used on our state assessments. And when we analyze data, particularly in math, when teachers looked at the questions that were asked, sometimes we were using different vocabulary. And so just ensuring that when we're instructing in class and talking about concepts with students, that we are using that vocabulary as well, because sometimes it throws students off. And so that was really kind of a key aha moment for our teachers as they looked at that data. And then, of course, making sure that all of our assessments are aligned to standards. That really helps us in our PLCs in the buildings and when we're looking across the district to say, this is really where we're strong, this is where we need to do some additional work, and we can do that in our assessments in our buildings across the district, and then of course the state assessments as well. And at the high school level, because many of our students are taking the ACT, we're also looking at those types of questions and providing opportunities for students to have practice so that they're familiar with all different kinds of assessment to set them up for success. Yep.
I have you, I'm sorry.
Time?
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
So, but don't forget that last piece, that semester test incentive. So
Okay.
skim through those bullets.
I will fly through. You bet, I can do that. So high schools have done a lot of work on the PLC model. I think elementary, that's where they're ahead of us. They've been doing PLCs probably better than we have for a long time, but that's been a focus. Buildings have done professional development, and we've done professional development at the district as well, and then at our director called meetings. One just thing I want to highlight that is a good holdover from COVID is that we have singletons. Most buildings have one economics teacher, for example. And so they are collaborating on a weekly basis via Zoom. And that's been powerful to have somebody else to collaborate with. Coaching cycles, this alludes a little bit to what you were talking about before. We did a lot of study with Diane Sweeney, and we did a whole virtual training with Jill Jackson. And Jill Jackson talks about 2 kinds of coaching that you need to do, and you start with those priority skills. And those priority skills are classroom management, engagement in the classroom, and lesson delivery, because you have to have those skills before you can really work in the content well. And so we have kind of an evaluative tool that teachers use when meeting with teachers, and some teachers, that's really where they start. They make sure they have those priority skills, and then bring in the next level of learning goals and looking at that data. They also did some key workshops once a month before and after school to provide some just key hot topics, reminders for teachers. We did also institute this year a semester test incentive. The state assessment, high school students are not always engaged in that assessment, we believe, as we would like them to be. I don't know what it was like in your house when my daughters were in elementary school with Dr. Boysen. Yes, they were highly motivated. I mean, they came home and they're like, we have to go to bed and we have to have a good breakfast. And, you know, my husband was up making eggs and all kinds of stuff. And by high school, they're like, you know, I mean, they still tried, but there's not a lot of skin in the game for high school students. It's not tied to a grade. Yes, it gives them early college entrance, but we wanted to try to see if we could raise the stakes for them a little bit. And so if students improved their scores or they rose to proficiency and then maintained at least 70% a C or higher in a course, they didn't have to take the semester test.
So 86% of our students did not have to take the semester test.
As seniors.
As seniors.
At my house, that really threw me off a little bit because I had a son that was sleeping in. I said, what's going on? You've got semester tests. And he explained, I was like, really? Are you sure? I mean, not that I didn't think he was a good student and achieved what he needed to, but that was, I think it worked.
We did see our scores go up both in math and ELA. Yeah. And there's just a quick quote there from the principal at Washington that you can read. Okay, I'll stop.
Yep.
And we can delay them just a little bit. I don't want to rush through. They have some really good visualizations, and I don't know if those are next, but we wanted to show you some of what Doug and Nicole's group have been working on. So don't go too fast.
Okay.
They can wait
Yep.
for a few minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to just, go ahead, Doug. I'll have you go.
So this has really been a 5-year journey for us, right? To try to take the data, the massive amounts of data that we collect, put it somewhere where we can organize it and access it, which is our data warehouse that we built. Put a visualization tool on that, which is Tableau, and then get it finally to the teacher level where we can take data and make impactful decisions from that. So this is just a few examples. And I will say that Nicole and I have whittled away at this for probably a good 5 years. And then a year ago in April, we were lucky enough to hire Chandra back there, our data engineer. And this year has been extremely impactful in accelerating the work that we've done. So with that, I'll let Nicole talk to a few of the examples.
Okay, so I'll go over this quadrant chart, which is used in, it's an impactful visual that's used in the buildings. The limitation with that is that it's by classroom only, so then we were able to use Tableau since we can customize it to then build it at the kind of district level. So I'll just explain this one in a little bit of detail, so you can just see how much information is kind of packed into one visual, one dashboard. So this is on the x-axis is the achievement of schools on a single term. So MAP is given in fall, winter, and spring. So it'll place the schools on their achievement on the x-axis from low to high. And then the y-axis is the growth. So if we want to look at fall to winter, winter to spring, fall to spring, fall to fall from one year, we choose the growth, and then that'll place them on the schools that made the most growth or least growth. So all of that is on there. The colors are different subjects. So you can see just in a glance by subject, and you can filter by grade and by certain schools. And so all of that just laid out in one chart.
So when building pulls this up from NWA for their MAP data, as a classroom, you can see which students are growing and which students aren't, and then you can intervene that way. And on this one, Nicole has taken it and removed the school names, of course, but you can see oranges would be reading or math, and the blue would be the other.
And these are just mock-ups that we've shown for you. So this one, we've really worked with the MTSS implementation and gathered feedback from different principal groups last year, and then have built this student profile viz. So this would be for each individual student. Staff can go in and really see a lot of information kind of packed on one. So looking at attendance, looking at behavior, if they're in high school, their credit attainment, looking at other math growth scores over their enrollment history here, and then state assessment scores. If the student's EL, it'll have their access scores, and that's just on the first tab in the student profile viz. So you can really kind of see at a glance their achievement, and then this is just one piece of the behavior.
Yep, I'm on this student profile. So as a team comes together at the building level and we're trying to problem solve around a student and say, hey, what's going on? This gives you that high level look of their time with us in the district and all the information we've collected, because we can say, oh my gosh, look they were cruising right along and then something happened in their junior year or something happened. So then it's that high level glance for that building problem solving team.
And that behavior component of it, it's really, you can really see in like a second tab of that piece of, you can see if there's a jump like here. If there's a jump in behavior events, you can see right along the timeline of that. So it becomes really quick that they can kind of see the information, same with the assessment. And then there's just an office referral example of building this for schools. And I won't explain this, you can kind of look at this, but I will just speak to one more example. When Linda was talking about the being a reader, that was really a collaborative effort between ATI and Linda's team, and they were collecting all this information. The schools were doing it on their own and going through a lot of work to collect that information and that data along the school year. And so really working together to say, where can we store that data, and then doing that so it's automatic and getting that work, all that work out of the data entry really across every school. Every teacher was doing that. And then we have built it so that you can look by the student. You can see how the student has done over the year on that being a reader, and then by classroom, by grade level, by school and district. So we were able to kind of build all that. I don't have a visual for that, but that was just another example of some of the work that we've been able to do across departments.
This is an example of accessing and utilizing our student information system, Infinite Campus, more. This is an early warning system, so any school can pull up their school, look at the distribution of students that are most at risk. It's based on something called a grad score, looking at all the data for that student, comparing it to hundreds of thousands of students across the country. What's the likelihood that they will graduate? And it looks at things like attendance, behavior, curriculum, and stability. So where those black markouts are students, right? And so on the next slide, we can go in and drill down into the student level and see over time what's been going on with that student. And then it also tells us what type of intervention would have the biggest impact. So in this case, the bigger circle, the green item there would mean that, grade-wise curriculum is where that needs to be focused, because they're probably doing okay for attendance and behavior. So that's an example of bringing something forward that, schools can use and really look at, some kids that might be struggling in certain areas. And then lastly, the other thing that we've been working on diligently, especially with Dr. Fedden, is how do we take an environment that used to exist with Google Docs and paper forms and folders and bring them into our student, into Infinite Campus. And so these are things like the Student Solution Referral Form is something that every building uses. It's consistent. It was designed under Dr. Fedden's leadership, and so every building can go in, access their form, complete it, and it stays with the student. It's not filed somewhere and lost or put in a Google Docs. And then we've also been able to use some of the functionality on what we call response to intervention, and actually put those interventions into the system. So it's all taking all of those types of forms and things that have been stored, who knows where, they don't follow the student, and put it into campus so it always follows the student. So those are just some examples of things that we've been able to accomplish, and we keep really collaborating with all of our partners to see what they need and trying to create those tool sets. So.
Just really quickly, some new things that we have implemented. So we have a new hire academy for all our newly hired teachers. Each one of the coordinators runs that throughout the year at just the right time, giving them the supports that they need, because we know they can't take it all in at the beginning of the year. So then how do we give that to them just at the right time? All teachers have had student engagement training or a Kagan training, and we'll continue that this summer to catch the teachers that we missed last year and then to onboard our new teachers. SPED Advantage. Did I talk a little bit about SPED Advantage?
It's okay. We moved all of our IEP systems and special education forms onto an online system, which allows for everybody, when kids move from building to building, when we have kids come in or leave, it just makes it a lot more accessible for everybody in the district. And it's really streamlined our processes and taken away a lot of the work that's really task heavy, and not giving more time to teachers to actually do their teaching part of things. Yep.
Yeah, gosh, what was it, 2 weeks ago now? We invited a member from each building to participate in teach training, and it's just it's really intense training working with students with some intense disabilities who we need to look at some very intense systems and supports for them. So we did 2 days of that, and they're taking part in some morning collaboration sessions, going in deeper and collaborating more on those, looking at scheduling, how they arrange their classrooms, and just their whole environment for those students. And we're gonna offer that again in a couple more weeks for more teachers, and our goal is to sustain that so every teacher gets that.
Good feedback on that too. And then Doug and Nicole talked about that data visualization and those common problem-solving forms and student intervention plans, and that has really helped, again, our building level teams to support students and look at their growth. And then looking forward, we announced our learning and assessment management system last week. So Canvas and Mastery Connect will be our common platform K-12. So everybody will be using Canvas, which will replace Seesaw, Schoology, and Google Classroom. So that'll be common. And then Mastery Connect will be our assessment platform, and they partner well together, so we'll provide training for all staff on that. But the strength in that is that it will tie our standards to the curriculum, to our assessments, and again, we can look at that at any time then, and we can say, how are our third graders doing at the assessment at this time? So a classroom teacher can look at it by her, at their own students, but then we can look at it building level and across the district, and we'll be able to do that K-12. And so we're very excited about that, and also the communication piece tied to that for parents, so that way they'll be able to log in, and they can see the information for their students too, and then look and see what it can do for communication K-12 across the district. So with that, we'll stand by for any questions.
Just wanted to comment on that kind of student-centered where it had the graph and the circles and things. And I feel like that would be super helpful because it's similar to, you know, in the medical profession, having like an interdisciplinary team meeting where you come in and you're like, the physical therapist is going to do this and the speech therapist is going to do this. And I feel like that it saves time because it doesn't require all of those individual people to be there to kind of speak to it because you have the data, which is already the evidence, but it helps you to create good questions and dig a little bit deeper. So that's very impressive and I think very helpful for those students who really need more answers than maybe they've gotten in the past because it was just so labor intensive to collect all of that data. So that's really great. And I think a lot of students and buildings in general will benefit from being able to have just that quick glance and then let's work on fixing that or showing that to a parent to say, this is their attendance or this is their, you know, I just think it's eye-opening for people to see that. So I was impressed by that.
I think we were using Tableau for a dashboard of COVID. And so when you pulled that up, I thought how encouraging for all of us to look at robust data that is impacting students in other ways other than COVID. That was great, yeah.
Little PTSD with our Tableau graphs for a while there. So this is great, and hats off to Dr. Boyson and her leadership and our entire team, because even just the growth from when I came almost 3 years ago has just been outstanding and huge. Really, really good growth. And what's really fun to hear is the things that I heard in this building, I now hear when I'm out in schools. And we see the evidence of it and the synergy that's grown around our systems that have gotten more refined and more useful are then being used more, and you begin to feel the flywheel effect of people using good data because they can, because they know then what to do with it, and you see results, and that's what we're all about. So great job, everybody, and good work on the visualization to put it up there so now we can share it with an even wider audience. Yeah, go ahead. And before you recess this meeting, temporary president, Ryder.
Okay, is there anybody that nobody signed up for public
Yep.
comment?
And don't leave after the STC meeting. That's your biggest task.
Yes.
Because we have to continue, so don't leave me.